My wife has an affair with an alternate personality. It all started on an ordinary Tuesday. My name is Ethan, 33, a project manager at a tech firm in Chicago. My life was comfortable, predictable even. I had a wife, Sophia, 29, a talented photographer who worked freelance. She was my world. We'd been married 4 or 5 years, shared everything, or so I thought. We didn't have kids yet. Life had been busy for both of us, and Sophia always said we'd talk about it when her career stabilized. I was okay with waiting. Or, at least, I convinced myself I was. But then, one evening, everything unraveled. Sophia had been acting strange for months, distant in ways that made me question if she was still the woman I married. We would sit at the dinner table, and she'd stare blankly at her plate, lost in some distant thought. When I asked her about it, she would shake her head and say, "Just a tough shoot today, that's all." Until the night I found her phone. I'm not proud of it, but you can only ignore a gut feeling for so long. She was in the shower, and her phone buzzed beside me on the couch. The screen lit up with a name I'd never seen before: Tristan, 31, an art dealer. The message read, "Can't wait to see you tonight, baby." My heart stopped. I could barely breathe, but my fingers moved instinctively. I opened her phone and found the messages. Hundreds of them. Flirtatious, passionate, explicit, everything that should have been between us was now between her and this Tristan. I scrolled further and saw the worst possible confirmation pictures. They had met multiple times. The timestamps were clear. This affair had been going on 4 months. All this time, Sophia had been living a double life, one that I knew nothing about. When she stepped out of the shower, I couldn't keep it in anymore. I stormed into the bedroom, shaking, holding her phone out like it was a weapon. Who the hell is Tristan? Sophia froze, her hand clutching the towel tight to her chest. She blinked once, twice, and then, something strange happened. Her expression softened, her body relaxed, and her eyes changed. She wasn't the terrified wife caught in a lie. She looked amused. "Oh, him," she said, casually brushing past me to get dressed. "Don't worry about Tristan. He's mine." I stood there, dumbfounded. Her voice had changed too, deeper, sultrier, like she wasn't even Sophia anymore. I didn't understand what was happening, but before I could say anything, she walked over to the mirror, applying makeup as if nothing was wrong. "You're not mad, are you, Ethan? You knew this would happen eventually. What the hell are you talking about?" I snapped, barely holding onto my sanity. "How could you cheat on me?" She laughed, actually laughed. "Sophia didn't cheat on you, silly. I did." Her words hit me like a truck. "What do you mean, I? You are Sophia." She turned to face me, a wicked smile playing on her lips. "Not quite. My name is Lydia." I staggered backward, my mind reeling. Was this some kind of sick joke? I'd never heard her mention anything about an alternate personality before, but the way she stood there, confident, poised, and completely unlike the woman I married, sent a chill down my spine. "What do you mean, Lydia? Who the hell is Lydia?" She chuckled softly, stepping closer to me, her fingers trailing down my arm in a way that felt foreign and unsettling. "Sophia doesn't know. She's weak. She's been letting me out more and more lately. I'm stronger than she is. I do what she won't, what she's too afraid to do. Like this." She motioned to the phone in my hand, unapologetic. I could barely find my words. You're telling me you're some sort of alternate personality, and you've been sleeping with another man?" She shrugged as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "Sophia's all prim and proper. But me? I take what I want. And Tristan? Oh, he's been fun. He's so easy to manipulate, unlike you. You're too boring." My stomach churned, and I struggled to process what I was hearing. Dissociative identity disorder? Was that what this was? I'd read about it in some psychology journal years ago, but I never imagined it could happen to someone I knew, someone I loved. The rage inside me was building, but so was the confusion. How could I be mad at Sophia when she didn't even know what was happening? How could I confront her when, according to Lydia, she wasn't even aware of the affair? Suddenly, a thought hit me like a lightning strike. Does Tristan know about this?" I asked, almost whispering. Lydia smirked, her eyes glittering with amusement. "Of course not. He thinks I'm Sophia. He has no idea there's more to the package, and it's better that way. Why spoil the fun?" My world was spinning. Not only was my wife cheating on me, but she wasn't even aware of it. This Lydia had taken control of her body, her life, and decided to start an affair without Sophia's knowledge. How was I supposed to deal with this? How was I supposed to look at my wife again knowing that, deep inside her, there was someone else pulling the strings? As if reading my thoughts, Lydia's smile grew wider. I told you, Ethan, you're not mad at Sophia, are you? She didn't do anything wrong. But me? I'm a whole different story. She sauntered back to the mirror, applying lipstick like she didn't have a care in the world. I couldn't take it anymore. I need to talk to Sophia, I said firmly. She laughed again, low and cruel. Oh, darling. Sophia's asleep right now. She won't be back for a while. But you can deal with me, if you like. After all, I'm the one who's been having all the fun. I stood there, fists clenched, mind racing. How the hell was I supposed to deal with this? Should I confront Tristan? Should I try to bring Sophia back, somehow? Or was Lydia the one I had to confront? One thing was clear: my life had just been thrown into a chaotic nightmare, and I was standing at the edge of a cliff, unsure if I could ever climb back up. I spent the next few days living in a fog of disbelief. Every time I looked at Sophia, I couldn't help but wonder, was it her, or was Lydia in control? My mind was a battlefield, and I couldn't shake the sickening thought of Tristan. Did he really believe he was having an affair with my wife? Did he have any idea that the person he was with wasn't Sophia at all? But there was something I couldn't let go, a nagging feeling that grew stronger every minute. I needed answers. So, I did what any desperate man in my position would do. I went behind her back. I researched dissociative identity disorder, trying to make sense of the bizarre situation I found myself in. I reached out to a therapist, who confirmed that personalities, or alters, as they were called, could form from trauma and exist without the primary personality knowing. Sophia must have been carrying this for years, without either of us realizing it. That night, as she slept peacefully beside me, I stared at the ceiling, my mind spiraling. How could I save my marriage when my wife wasn't even aware of the betrayal? If Lydia had taken over without Sophia's knowledge, was Sophia blameless? And what if Lydia came out again? What if Tristan kept calling? But it was the next morning that truly shattered me. It was a Saturday, and Sophia was back to her usual self, or at least, that's what I thought. We were sitting in the kitchen, and I couldn't help but notice the bags under her eyes, the way her hands trembled when she poured herself a cup of coffee. I knew I had to ask. Sophia, I began hesitantly, do you ever feel like you lose time? She froze, a cup halfway to her lips, and set it down slowly. What do you mean? Like, do you ever feel like you wake up and hours have passed? Or you can't remember doing certain things? Her face paled, but she nodded slowly. Sometimes. I thought it was just stress or being overworked. Why do you ask? I took a deep breath, knowing what I was about to say could destroy everything. I think there's more going on. I think you might have. Before I could finish, she cut me off. Did I know? My heart stopped. I stared at her, the weight of her words sinking in like a stone in water. You know, she nodded, her expression unreadable. I've known for years, Ethan. The floor felt like it was tilting beneath me. I stood there, speechless, trying to make sense of it. But how? Why didn't you tell me? Sophia sighed, her eyes avoiding mine. Because I thought I could manage it. I've been seeing a therapist since I was a teenager. Lydia has been around for as long as I can remember. I thought I had her under control. Under control? My voice came out harsher than I intended. Sophia, she's been sleeping with someone else. She's been cheating on me, and you. I know, she snapped, finally looking at me with tears welling in her eyes. I know, Ethan. But you have to understand, Lydia is part of me. I've spent years trying to keep her at bay, but she's stronger than I thought. And when I'm stressed, when I'm overwhelmed, she comes out. She takes over. I shook my head, feeling a mix of anger and confusion. So all this time, you knew she existed? You knew she was seeing Tristan, and you didn't tell me? Sophia bit her lip, her face crumbling with guilt. No, I didn't know about Tristan until recently. Lydia's always had a thing for risk, but I swear, I never thought she'd go this far. I didn't know she was capable of this. I was stunned. She knew. She had known about Lydia all along, and she had kept it from me, leaving me to live in the dark while another part of her was out there betraying me. The rage I had buried deep within me over the past few days began to bubble to the surface. You lied to me, I said quietly, my voice shaking. You've been lying to me for years. Sophia wiped at her eyes, shaking her head. It wasn't like that. I didn't want to burden you with it. I thought I could handle it. I thought I could keep her from hurting you. Well, you didn't, I shot back, my hands trembling with anger. She's been seeing Tristan for months, Sophia. She's been making a fool out of me, out of us. How am I supposed to deal with that? She took a deep breath, her shoulders slumping as if the weight of the world had just been dropped on her. Ethan, there's something else you need to know. My chest tightened. What now? Sophia's eyes filled with tears, and her voice cracked as she spoke. it wasn't just Lydia. I've been seeing Tristan too. The words hit me like a sledgehammer. I staggered back, my breath catching in my throat. What? I didn't plan it, she sobbed, her hands shaking as she tried to explain. It started with Lydia. She would take over, and I didn't know what was happening at first. But then I found the messages. I found out about Tristan, and I didn't stop it. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My mind couldn't comprehend the betrayal. So, you knew Lydia was seeing him, and instead of stopping it, I was lonely, Ethan, she cried, tears streaming down her face. You were always working. We barely talked anymore. I felt invisible. And Lydia, she was living the life I wanted. She was carefree. She didn't care about the consequences. I wanted that too. My whole world shattered in that moment. It wasn't just Lydia. Sophia had let this happen. She had chosen to go along with it. My wife, the woman I loved, had been cheating on me, not just with her alternate personality, but with her own free will. I stood there, staring at her, the betrayal sinking into my bones like a cold wind. I couldn't stay. Not now. Not like this. I need to leave, I muttered, grabbing my jacket and storming toward the door. Ethan, wait, she called after me, but I didn't stop. I couldn't look at her, not after what she'd done. As I walked out into the cold night air, one thing became clear in my mind. If both Lydia and Sophia had betrayed me, then they both needed to be punished. As the cold air hit my face, numbing my skin, I realized that the wound in my chest wasn't from just one betrayal, but two. Both Sophia and Lydia had conspired, knowingly or not, to rip apart the trust we'd spent years building. The life we had, the love we had, was it ever real? Or had it always been a lie, manipulated by her fractured mind? With each step away from our house, anger surged through me like molten lava. I couldn't stop replaying her words in my head, like a broken record. It wasn't just Lydia. I've been seeing him too. She had chosen to betray me, and now, all I could think about was revenge. But this wasn't the kind of situation where simple payback would do the trick. No, I needed to think bigger. I needed to be smarter. A well-planned revenge, not just on Lydia but on Sophia herself, was the only thing that would satisfy me. I couldn't just let her off the hook with an argument or a confrontation. I needed to make them both regret everything they had done. As I kept walking, my thoughts swirled, and then it hit me. Tristan didn't know about Lydia, about Sophia's fractured identity. He believed he was cheating with the real Sophia. What if I used that against them? I could turn their secret relationship into a nightmare they'd never forget. But first, I had to gather intel. If I wanted my plan to work, I needed to know exactly how deep this affair went, how often Lydia was coming out, how long Sophia had been seeing Tristan, and most importantly, what Tristan really thought was going on. I found myself standing outside of a dingy dive bar, a place far from the upper middle-class world Sophia and I lived in. I needed space, time to think, and maybe a stiff drink to numb the rage. I walked inside, ordered a whiskey, and sat down at a back table where the low lighting matched my mood. I pulled out my phone, opened the messaging app, and stared at Tristan's number for a long moment. There it was, the man's name, saved under some ridiculous contact name that Lydia must have made up. Rogue Heart, it read. Pathetic. It was like looking at a piece of the puzzle that had been staring me in the face the whole time, but I'd never bothered to put it together. I had considered texting him directly, letting him know that I was aware of the affair, but then, something much more devious crossed my mind. What if Lydia reached out to him instead? What if I became Lydia? After all, he didn't know about Sophia's did, and it wouldn't be hard to pose as her alter. I'd just need to be convincing enough, say the right things, play into his delusion. I gulped down the rest of the whiskey, feeling the burn trail down my throat, and opened up the keyboard. Slowly, carefully, I typed Lydia, hey babe, we need to talk. I've been thinking about us, and I'm ready to take things to the next level. I stared at the message for a moment, my finger hovering over the send button. Was I really about to do this? But then, a wave of anger surged through me. Yes, I was. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. This was about regaining control over my marriage, over my life. I hit send. Within minutes, Tristan responded, hey gorgeous, I've been waiting to hear from you. What's on your mind? My heart pounded as I crafted my response, thinking carefully about how Lydia might talk to him. I had to strike a balance between sounding seductive and planting the seeds of my plan. Lydia, I've been thinking about leaving Ethan. I can't keep sneaking around like this anymore. I want to be with you. That should be enough to stir him up, to make him believe that Lydia was serious about taking this relationship beyond the shadows. And it worked. Tristan, I was hoping you'd say that. I've been thinking about you all the time. When can I see you? Perfect. I smiled to myself. Now, I had him where I wanted him. I continued the conversation, telling him that I wanted to meet up soon, but that we had to be careful. I made sure to drop subtle hints that Lydia was getting restless with her other life, carefully nudging him toward my endgame. Then, I turned to Sophia. Back at home, I had started to gather little pieces of information without her noticing, tracking the times Lydia seemed to come out, the subtle shifts in her personality. It was strange how obvious it all was now that I knew what to look for. There were the little things, like the way she dressed differently, her bolder attitude when Lydia took over. It wasn't just in her clothes, it was in her body language, her voice. As Sophia, she was reserved, thoughtful, almost timid. But when Lydia was in control, she became a whole different woman. She flirted more, smiled more, acted more. How had I missed it? She had been cheating in broad daylight, yet I hadn't seen the signs. But the information was power. Now I could predict when Lydia would surface, and that gave me an advantage. I could manipulate the situation to push her and Tristan into doing something drastic, something that would play right into my hands. The next few days were crucial. I carefully crafted messages as Lydia, leading Tristan on, making him believe she was ready to leave me for him. At the same time, I began subtly planting doubts in Sophia's mind. I told her I had been feeling distant lately, that I wasn't sure where our marriage was going. It wasn't hard to pretend. After everything she had done, the words came out naturally. My goal was to make both of them nervous, paranoid. I wanted Sophia to feel like something was wrong but not be able to put her finger on it. I wanted Lydia to come out more, to get reckless. And Tristan, I wanted him to push Lydia into taking a bold step that would lead to their downfall. I crafted the final piece of the puzzle one evening when Sophia was asleep. I took her phone, which she always left on the nightstand, and logged into her messaging app. I sent a message to Lydia's therapist, posing as Sophia. Sophia, I've been feeling like I'm losing control. Lydia is out more often, and I can't stop her. I think she's doing things I don't know about. I knew the therapist would take this seriously, and if everything went according to plan, it would only be a matter of time before Lydia's therapist would suggest something drastic, like committing her to a treatment facility. The best part? Sophia wouldn't remember sending the message, so it would all come crashing down around her without her even realizing it. Now, it was just a waiting game. I had set the stage perfectly. A few days later, Tristan texted me, "Well, Lydia," with excitement in his message. "Tristan, I've been thinking, maybe we should make it official. I want you to move in with me. I'll help you break things off with Ethan." The trap was closing. "Lydia, I'll do it. Meet me tomorrow night at our spot." And with that, I knew exactly how it was all going to play out. Lydia would show up, thinking she was about to escape her life with me for good. Tristan would be there, clueless about the chaos that was about to unfold. Sophia, on the other hand, would have no idea what was coming her way. I had everything in place. It was time to burn it all to the ground. I could feel my pulse in my fingertips as I drove to the restaurant where Tristan and Lydia planned to meet. The night was thick with tension, a strange, almost electric sensation hanging in the air. It was all coming to a head, months of lies, deception, and hidden personalities converging into one pivotal moment. The anticipation was suffocating, but so was the fury bubbling just beneath the surface. Tonight, everything would fall apart for Sophia, Lydia, and Tristan. But unlike them, I had the power to decide how it would end. I parked across the street from the restaurant, a low-lit, upscale bistro that Tristan and Lydia had used as their rendezvous point. The irony wasn't lost on me. I had eaten here with Sophia countless times over the years, celebrating anniversaries, birthdays, and our perfect life together. And now, here I was, a spectator in my own unraveling marriage, waiting for it to explode in spectacular fashion. I took a deep breath and scanned the restaurant windows. Through the dim light, I could just make out Tristan sitting at a table by the window, nervously checking his phone. He had no idea what was coming. Poor bastard. And then, right on cue, I saw her. Not Sophia, but Lydia. There was a distinct difference in the way she carried herself when she became Lydia. She walked into the restaurant with her shoulders back, chin high, like she owned the place. She was wearing a tight black dress that clung to her figure in a way Sophia never would have chosen, her hair loosely curled and lips painted crimson red. She looked like someone entirely different, someone I barely recognized anymore. As she approached Tristan's table, he stood up, grinning like an idiot. He was completely besotted, thinking he was about to sweep Lydia away from her life with me and into his arms. The fool had no idea that he'd fallen for a version of my wife that didn't even exist. I watched as they exchanged a brief, flirtatious kiss before sitting down. Tristan reached for her hand, looking into her eyes with an intensity that made my stomach churn. But Lydia was playing her part well. She acted coy, smiling and laughing at whatever charming nonsense he was spewing. And all the while, I watched them like a predator watching its prey, my mind calculating the next move in this game of deception. I got out of the car and crossed the street, pulling my phone from my pocket. The trap was already set. Sophia's therapist had received the carefully orchestrated message I'd sent from her phone. I knew Lydia's erratic behavior would only make things worse. By the time the therapist contacted Sophia, it would be too late. The pieces were falling into place. I pushed open the door to the restaurant and made my way toward their table, my heart pounding so loudly I could barely hear the low murmur of the other patrons. Tristan noticed me first. His face turned pale as his eyes widened in shock. "Ethan," he stammered, quickly letting go of Lydia's hand as if that would somehow erase what had been happening. Lydia, however, didn't flinch. Her gaze locked with mine, and for a split second, I saw something flash in her eyes. Was it guilt? No, it wasn't guilt. It was fear. She knew something was off, but she didn't know just how much. I leaned in close to their table, making sure to keep my voice low but sharp, like a knife cutting through the tension. "Lydia," I said, making it a point to use her alter's name, "I didn't expect to see you here with him." Tristan shifted in his seat uncomfortably. "Listen, man, it's not what it looks like." I couldn't help but laugh at how cliché his excuse was. Not what it looks like? Oh, it was exactly what it looked like. "I know exactly what it is," I said, keeping my voice eerily calm. "In fact, I know a lot more than you do, Tristan." Lydia's face twisted into confusion, and that's when I struck. I reached into my pocket, pulling out my phone and tapping the screen. "Do you want to see what's really been going on behind your back?" I asked, holding the phone out for both of them to see. Lydia's expression changed as she saw what was on the screen. She leaned in closer, her eyes narrowing in disbelief. It was a message from her, but not from her. The words were hers, the name was hers, but she had no memory of sending it. What is this?" Lydia stammered, her voice cracking for the first time. "Oh, you don't remember?" I asked, feigning surprise. "It's a text you sent to your therapist. Something about losing control of your other personalities and not being able to stop Lydia from making choices without your consent. You know, like cheating on your husband with him." I pointed at Tristan, who was now sweating bullets. The color drained from Lydia's face as she looked from me to Tristan, then back to me. The truth was unraveling in front of her eyes, but it was too late for her to piece it together. She didn't remember sending that message because Sophia had been asleep when I sent it. But I had made sure the evidence pointed directly at her, at Lydia's impulsiveness and reckless behavior. "I don't," she started, but I cut her off. "You're right," I said, voice lowering. "You don't remember because you weren't in control. But Sophia remembers. And now, the therapist knows. You see, Lydia, the moment you started this affair, you set things in motion that you couldn't control." Tristan blinked, still hopelessly lost. "Wait, what the hell is going on?" he asked, looking between us like he had just stumbled into a bad dream. I turned to him with a smirk. "Let me break it down for you. The woman you've been sleeping with? She's not who you think she is. She has dissociative identity disorder, multiple personalities. You've been seeing Lydia, her alter, without even realizing it. And Sophia, the real her, has no clue what's been happening." Tristan's jaw dropped as the weight of my words sank in. He looked at Lydia, no, at Sophia, or whoever she was at that moment, with disbelief, horror even. The cracks in their perfect little fantasy were starting to show, and I reveled in it. Now came the next part of my plan, the part that would truly break them. "You know," I continued, "I thought about confronting you both, yelling, making a scene, but then I realized something. You don't deserve my anger. You deserve each other." Lydia, Sophia, whatever version of her was present, just sat there in stunned silence. Tristan, on the other hand, was starting to look like a caged animal, panicking as he realized how deep the mess had become. "What are you going to do?" Tristan asked, his voice barely a whisper. I smiled coldly. "Oh, don't worry. You'll both get what's coming to you." I turned to Lydia, locking eyes with her. "You see, I've already made some calls. Sophia, your therapist will be in touch soon. They'll likely want to talk to you about what's been happening, about how Lydia's been taking over more and more. Maybe they'll even suggest hospitalization, just to keep things under control." Her eyes widened in shock. You wouldn't." "Oh, I would," I said darkly. "And you know what the best part is? You won't remember half of it. You'll wake up one day in a sterile room, wondering how you got there, but Lydia? She'll be gone, locked away, because they'll force you into treatment. and Tristan here will be left wondering if any of it was real at all. Tristan stood up abruptly, knocking his chair back in panic. "You're crazy. You can't just try me," I snapped, cutting him off. "You had an affair with a woman who doesn't even know she's been cheating. So, you better believe I'll make sure you both suffer for it." I could see it happening. Lydia was spiraling. She was losing control, her mind trying to make sense of what was real and what wasn't. She started shaking her head, mumbling incoherently, and in that moment, I knew she was gone. Sophia would come back soon, and when she did, she'd have no memory of any of this. But for now, I relished watching Lydia's world crumble. This was my revenge, and it was sweet. The morning after everything went down felt eerily quiet. I woke up to the sunlight streaming through the blinds, the weight of the previous night still heavy on my chest. My house was silent, the absence of Sophia almost haunting. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to process everything I'd set in motion. Lydia, no, Sophia, had crumbled in front of me, unable to make sense of what was real and what wasn't. Tristan had stormed out of the restaurant in a panic, his perfect illusion shattered. The therapist had already scheduled an emergency session, likely setting off a series of events that would ensure Sophia's breakdown was well documented. The fallout was imminent, and there was no going back, but I didn't regret it, not even for a second. A few days later, I was sitting at the kitchen table, nursing a cup of coffee when the phone rang. It was Sophia's therapist. "Mr. Porter," the therapist's voice was calm but firm, "I wanted to inform you that Sophia has been admitted to a psychiatric facility for observation. Her dissociative episodes have become more frequent and concerning." I expected to feel a pang of guilt, but there was only a strange sense of finality. "I see," I replied, my voice devoid of emotion. "Is she going to be all right?" The therapist paused. "It's hard to say right now. She's fragmented. Lydia has been dominant for some time, and we're trying to bring Sophia back. But it's going to take time. A lot of time." I thanked the therapist, hung up the phone, and stared blankly at the wall. The woman I loved, my real wife, was now locked away, and it was all because of Lydia. Because of the affair, because of the lies. But in a way, I had done what I had to do. I had chosen revenge over forgiveness, and now, we were both paying the price. A week passed before I heard anything from Tristan. I had half expected him to try to reach out, to plead for some kind of understanding, but instead, I received something even better, a message from a mutual friend. Tristan had left town, disappearing without so much as a goodbye. He had lost everything, his job, his reputation, and his dignity. Word had spread quickly about the affair with a woman who didn't even know she was having an affair. His colleagues viewed him as some kind of monster, and in his shame, he vanished. I couldn't help but feel a surge of satisfaction. The man who had crept into my marriage, thinking he was stealing my wife, had been utterly destroyed. He had fallen for an illusion, and in the end, he'd lost far more than he'd ever gained. I had outplayed him, and now he was just another casualty in this twisted game. 3 months later, I found myself sitting in a sterile hospital waiting room, the smell of disinfectant clinging to the air. I hadn't visited Sophia since she had been admitted. I wasn't sure if I wanted to see her like this, broken, fragile, lost in her own mind. But something had drawn me here, some unfinished part of the story that needed closure. The door opened, and a nurse guided me into a small room with a single chair. There she was, sitting by the window, staring out at the courtyard. Her hair was longer now, unkempt, and she wore a simple hospital gown. When she turned to face me, I saw a flicker of recognition in her eyes, Sophia's eyes. "Ethan," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. I nodded, taking a seat across from her. "How are you feeling?" She hesitated, looking down at her hands. "I don't know. I don't remember everything. The doctors say it'll take time to piece things together." I swallowed hard, unsure of what to say. This was Sophia, the woman I had fallen in love with, the woman who had been ripped apart by her own mind. And yet, a part of me still felt the sting of betrayal, still remembered the night she had slipped into Lydia's world, seeking comfort in Tristan's arms. "I'm sorry," she whispered, tears welling in her eyes. "I never wanted any of this. I don't even know how it all happened." I sat there, staring at her, feeling a strange mix of pity and anger. She didn't remember. She didn't even know the damage she had caused, the chaos Lydia had left in her wake. "You don't have to apologize," I said, my voice cold. "It wasn't your fault." And maybe that was the truth. Maybe it really wasn't Sophia's fault. But I couldn't bring myself to forgive her. Not completely. As we sat there in silence, I thought about everything that had transpired, the affair, the confrontation, the revenge. I had burned our lives to the ground, and for what? To prove a point? To make her suffer for something she wasn't even aware of? Then, something shifted in her expression. Sophia blinked, her eyes narrowing slightly as she looked at me. I've been dreaming about someone, she said, her voice shaky. Someone who feels familiar but isn't. I stiffened. What do you mean? She hesitated, biting her lip. It's like there's another me, inside, but I don't know who she is. My heart sank. I had thought Lydia was gone, locked away forever in the deepest corners of Sophia's mind. But now, hearing her words, I realized the truth. Lydia wasn't gone. She had never been gone. She was still there, lurking beneath the surface, waiting for the right moment to take control again. And when that moment came, I knew we'd be back in this same nightmare all over again. Sophia looked at me with pleading eyes, as if she could sense the truth, even if she couldn't fully grasp it. Ethan, what's happening to me? I stood up, unable to bear it any longer. I don't know, I lied, my voice hollow. But deep down, I knew. Lydia was still alive. And she would always be there, in the shadows of our lives, waiting to destroy everything once more. As I walked out of the hospital, I couldn't help but wonder, had I really won? Or had Lydia won after all?